I never thought peace could feel like a stranger. After everything my daughters and I had been through, the betrayal, the divorce, and the sudden loss, it felt like every time we started to breathe again, something else tried to choke the air out of us. When my husband, Mark, passed away last year, I didn't cry right away. I think I was too exhausted, too numb. The grief came later, slowly, in waves. But the shock? That came instantly, because even though our marriage was already falling apart, I never imagined he'd be gone for good. Mark and I had been married for 18 years. We met young, fell fast, and built a family that I thought would last forever. We had 2 daughters, Lena, now 17, and Sophie, 15. They were my world, my reason to stay strong even when life started to crumble. But before Mark's accident, everything had already begun to unravel. I discovered his affair in the cruelest way possible, through our daughters. Lena had borrowed his tablet one afternoon to finish a school project, and instead found a stream of messages that shattered everything we thought we knew. Photos, love notes, plans for a future that didn't include us. And worse, there were 2 boys, babies, not even toddlers, born from that affair. The affair partner, a woman I'd never even met, passed away in the same accident that took Mark's life. In a single night, both of them were gone, and all the buried truths came spilling out. The weeks that followed were chaos. Lawyers, wills, custody fights. My ex-in-laws, Evelyn and Richard, decided that my daughters weren't handling the situation properly. According to them, my girls were supposed to welcome those 2 little boys into our home to honor Mark's memory. But my girls were broken. They didn't just lose their father. They lost their trust, their innocence, their sense of family. The last thing they needed was to be forced into parenting the living reminders of his betrayal. I told Evelyn and Richard no. I told them we needed time, space, and healing. That's when they turned cruel. They accused me of poisoning the girls against their grandparents, of keeping them away, of being unchristian, ungrateful, heartless. They said I'd stolen their son's life insurance and inheritance, money that by law and will belonged to my daughters. For months, they called, showed up unannounced, and even filed to challenge custody of the girls. They wanted visitation rights, grandparent privileges, they said. I stood firm. I didn't want my daughters dragged back into that emotional battlefield. Eventually, I thought the worst was over. But I was wrong. It happened on a Saturday, a sunny, warm day that should have been ordinary. It was Sophie's birthday week, and though her party was planned for later in the month, I wanted to give her a small celebration of her own. We decided to visit the local farmers market together. It's one of those peaceful places filled with the smell of baked bread, fresh fruit, and laughter. I gave her a little budget and told her she could buy anything she wanted. Sweets, chocolate, handmade jewelry, whatever caught her eye. She beamed like she hadn't in months, grabbed Lena's hand, and ran off. For the first time in a long while, I smiled too. But after about an hour, I realized I hadn't seen them. I tried calling Sophie, but before I could, my phone rang. Her voice was trembling. Mom, some women are yelling at me. I don't know what to do. The words froze me in place. My stomach twisted. I told her to stay where she was, grabbed Lena, and hurried toward the vendor stalls. And that's when I saw them. 6 older women, standing in a half circle around Sophie. Their expressions were sharp, judgmental, and full of venom. One of them pointed a finger. It's shameful, what you're doing to your grandparents. You should be helping them, not ignoring them. Another chimed in. Your mother's teaching you to hate family. That's not what good Christian girls do. Sophie was crying. Her hands shook as she clutched a small bag of chocolates. Lena stood beside her, tense and protective. I pushed through the crowd. Excuse me, I said, my voice trembling but firm. You have no right to speak to my daughter that way. One of the women, someone I recognized from my old church, lifted her chin. Maybe if you were a better mother, she wouldn't be lost. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I took a deep breath. You don't get to judge my family. You don't know what we've been through. Oh, we do, another woman snapped. Your ex-mother-in-law told us everything. You're keeping her from her grandkids after she lost her only son. You should be ashamed. For a moment, I couldn't even process it. Evelyn. Of course. This wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. She had sent them. I turned to Lena. Sweetheart, take your sister, pay for what you got, and go to the car. She hesitated, her eyes wide with anger. Mom, please, I said softly. Go. As they walked away, I faced the women again. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. You don't know the truth. You don't know what that woman has done to us. So before you call me unchristian, maybe look in the mirror. Their expressions twisted into outrage. Some muttered prayers under their breath. Others shouted after me as I turned to leave. By the time I reached the car, the girls were already inside, Sophie sobbing quietly while Lena held her close. I started the engine and drove off, my heart breaking all over again. That night, after I put the girls to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flickering candle I'd lit hours ago. The anger came first, hot, pulsing, alive. Then the sadness, heavy and unrelenting. Why couldn't they just leave us alone? Why couldn't they let us heal? I needed answers. So I messaged an old acquaintance from our previous church, someone I still trusted, a kind man named Daniel, who'd always tried to stay neutral. I told him what had happened at the market. A few minutes later, his reply came. I'm so sorry. I think I know why this happened. Evelyn posted something in the church group last night. My stomach dropped. He sent screenshots. And as I scrolled through them, my blood ran cold. There. It was Evelyn's long post written in the most dramatic tone imaginable. She painted herself and Richard as victims, claiming they'd been abandoned by their only family after losing their son. She said I'd turned their granddaughters against them and left them penniless, even homeless. She even claimed that the 2 baby boys, Mark's affair children, were our surrogate children that I had cruelly refused to accept because they were boys. It was a web of lies so carefully spun, it almost sounded believable. And worst of all, hundreds of comments followed. Church members offering prayers, sympathy, and, in some cases, outrage toward me and my daughters. I sat there for a long time, scrolling through every line, every comment, every lie. At one point, I caught myself whispering aloud, how could she? The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes but a strange clarity. I'd spent months trying to stay quiet, trying to take the high road, trying to let peace return. But this was different. She hadn't just come after me. She had sent people to harass my daughters. That was the line she should never have crossed. That was the morning I decided I wasn't going to let lies define us anymore. I wasn't going to fight dirty, but I was going to fight with the truth. Because sometimes telling the truth is the most powerful act of revenge, and I had plenty of it. The morning after the market incident felt strangely calm. The sky outside my kitchen window glowed with a soft, silvery light, and the air smelled like rain even though no clouds were in sight. I sat there with my coffee, half awake, watching the steam rise and swirl like thoughts I couldn't hold on to. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie's frightened face, Lena's clenched jaw, and those women's voices echoing in my head, accusing, condemning, certain they were righteous. By the time the clock struck 8, I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to yell or threaten or throw accusations online. I was going to do what Evelyn never did, tell the truth. But before anything, I needed to protect my daughters. At breakfast, Sophie poked at her cereal, quiet as a whisper. Lena scrolled her phone, probably checking if anyone from school had seen the Facebook mess. I could see the fear hiding behind her steady posture. "Girls," I said softly, "I know what happened yesterday was scary, and I know what's going around online. But I promise you, we're going to be okay." Lena looked up. "What if Grandma shows up again? What if her church people come here?" "They won't," I said firmly. "And if they do, we'll call the police. But we're not going to hide from lies. We're just going to tell our story." Sophie frowned. "Will people even believe us?" I smiled gently. "Eventually, the truth always finds ears ready to listen." I meant it. Maybe not everyone would believe us, but truth had a way of rippling out, touching hearts, forcing light into dark corners. That afternoon, I opened the storage boxes stacked in the corner of my bedroom, the ones filled with old files, documents and printed messages from the divorce proceedings. It felt heavy to look through them again, like reopening a wound that had almost healed. There were screenshots of conversations between Mark and his affair partner, text threads where he admitted his betrayal, emails from his parents urging me to forgive him quietly for the sake of the church, letters from Evelyn criticizing my parenting. I wasn't collecting these to humiliate anyone. I wanted to protect my girls' names, our truth, our dignity. I spent hours sorting everything, labeling it, and writing small notes explaining what each piece showed. Somewhere between the papers, I found an old photo of Mark holding Sophie as a toddler. His smile was easy, proud, genuine. I whispered to it, "Why did you do this to us?" There was no answer, only silence and the ticking of the clock. A few days later, Daniel, the man from the church who had messaged me, called. "I've been hearing things," he said cautiously. "A lot of people are confused. Some think Evelyn exaggerated. Others are starting to question everything." "That's good," I said quietly. "They should question it," he hesitated. "Would you be comfortable if I showed a few people the messages you sent me?" "Not to start drama, just to stop the rumors," I thought for a moment. "Yes, but please blur out names. I don't want a witch hunt. I just want peace." Daniel chuckled softly. "Peace might take a while, but truth helps." Over the next week, small shifts began to happen. A few church members removed their comments under Evelyn's post. Some even messaged me privately, saying they were sorry for what had happened at the market. It wasn't a public apology, but it was a start. The following Sunday, I was in the grocery store when I saw Evelyn. She was standing by the bakery section, clutching a loaf of bread like it might break. Her husband, Richard, was beside her, looking tired, his once confident shoulders slumped. Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she spoke first. "You've turned everyone against us." I took a breath. "No, Evelyn. You did that yourself when you sent strangers to attack my child." She flinched but tried to stand taller. They just wanted to remind her of family. "Family doesn't corner a crying 15-year-old, I said, my voice shaking with quiet anger. "You lied to your church, you lied about me, and you've dragged our daughters through pain they never asked for." Richard muttered something about leaving, but Evelyn wasn't finished. "You think people will side with you? They know what kind of woman you are." "I'm a mother," I replied. "That's the only kind I need to be." I left without another word. My hands trembled the entire drive home, but inside, something strange was shifting. An old fear cracking open. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. Over the next 2 weeks, the rumors began to twist again, but this time they carried pieces of the truth. People started questioning Evelyn's story. They remembered things she'd said that didn't add up. The supposed surrogate lie sounded absurd once whispered outside her own echo chamber. I stayed silent publicly, letting time and quiet truth do their work. Meanwhile, Lena and Sophie began to smile more. Sophie joined a small art club at school. Lena started helping me in the garden again. There were still bad days, but laughter was slowly returning. Then, one evening, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, a woman stood there, one of the 6 who had yelled at Sophie in the market. Her eyes were red, her hands clasped tightly. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "Evelyn told us things that, well, they weren't true." I shouldn't have spoken to your daughter that way. I didn't know what to say. I simply nodded. Thank you for coming. She handed me a folded letter. This is for your girls. Some of the others wanted to write too. When she left, I stood there for a moment, heart pounding, the cool air brushing against my face. Inside the letter were a few handwritten notes. Simple, sincere apologies. One even said, "We see now how much pain you've endured. We wish you peace." I sat on the couch and cried. Not out of sadness, but release. As weeks passed, Evelyn's world started to shrink. Her grand statements online turned into defensive rants, then into vague posts about being misunderstood. Some church members distanced themselves. Others offered polite silence. Daniel told me the pastor had finally spoken to her privately, encouraging her to step away from public posting. She's not banned, he explained, but she's being asked to reflect. It's causing quite a stir. I felt no joy in that, just a strange, quiet sympathy. Evelyn wasn't an evil woman. She was a broken one, clinging to pride and denial instead of grief. But I also knew she had to face the harm she'd done, and maybe that was the only way any of us could heal. One Saturday, a small envelope appeared in our mailbox. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single note. I went too far. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I miss my granddaughters and I'm sorry for the things I said. I sat there staring at it for a long time. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was something. I didn't respond. Not yet. But I didn't throw the letter away either. Maybe one day, when my daughters are ready, we'll decide together what forgiveness looks like. A month after the market incident, our home felt lighter. The girls laughed at breakfast again. We started volunteering at an animal shelter, something we'd talked about for years. There were still whispers in the community. There always are. But they didn't hurt anymore. Because the people who mattered knew the truth. And those who didn't never really wanted it anyway. One evening, I looked out the window and saw Sophie drawing by the garden table, her face peaceful in the sunset glow. Lena was reading on the porch swing, her headphones in, humming softly. I realized then that healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It comes quietly in moments like this, when laughter sounds natural again, when the world doesn't feel like it's closing in. Before going to bed that night, I wrote a short entry in my journal. I can't change the past. I can't rewrite what Mark did or undo the lies Evelyn spread. But I can protect what remains good. My girls, our peace, our home. The truth doesn't always fix everything, but it gives you a place to stand. I closed the book, blew out the candle, and whispered a prayer, not for revenge, but for release. A few months passed. The air had shifted. Life felt softer again. I could finally breathe without waiting for the next rumor to hit. Sophie's laughter filled the house like sunlight through open curtains, and Lena's confidence had returned, steady, strong, no longer shadowed by fear, but peace. I learned isn't something that simply arrives one morning and stays forever. It's something you choose again and again, every day, even when old wounds try to reopen. One Thursday, while I was sorting laundry, Lena came into the room holding her phone. "Mom," she said, her tone cautious, "you might want to see this." I took her phone. On the screen was a post from Evelyn, my ex-mother-in-law. It wasn't her usual fiery sermon. This time it was different. She'd written, "I've been wrong about many things. I hurt people I claim to love, and I confuse pride with faith. If forgiveness is possible, I pray for it. If not, I will still live trying to do better." Hundreds of comments followed. Some praised her honesty, others offered prayers, and a few questioned her sudden humility. But to me, the words were clear. She was trying. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, because while those words couldn't undo everything she'd done, they meant she was finally facing herself. Sophie came into the room, curious. "Does that mean she wants to see us again?" I hesitated. "Maybe, but that's a decision we'll make together, okay? You don't owe anyone forgiveness before you're ready." Lena nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think people can really change?" I smiled faintly. "Yes. but only when they stopped pretending they never did anything wrong. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the garden had begun to bloom again. Soft pink petals, gentle green leaves after weeks of rain. Nature has a quiet way of healing, of growing back even after storms tear everything down. I thought about Evelyn, about how grief, when left unspoken, can rot into bitterness. She had lost her son too, in a way, not to death, but to his own choices. And maybe that loss had twisted her into something unrecognizable, until all she knew how to do was control and accuse. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her, just an ache for what could have been. A few days later, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was from the church. They were hosting a small community dinner to celebrate forgiveness and new beginnings. The card was handwritten by Daniel, who had stayed in touch through everything. At first I thought about throwing it away. But then Sophie said quietly, "Mom, maybe we should go." I looked at her surprised. "Why?" I asked. "Because I don't want to be afraid to exist anymore," she said simply. "And maybe it's time people saw who we really are." Her words hit deep. My daughter, the same one who'd cried in the car after being yelled at by strangers, was now ready to stand tall again. So we went. The evening was warm, lanterns glowing softly above long wooden tables. People milled about with gentle smiles, the smell of roasted vegetables and bread in the air. For a few minutes, I felt out of place, like walking into a memory that had hurt too much to revisit. Then Daniel spotted us and waved. "You came," he said warmly. "Couldn't hide forever," I replied with a small smile. We spoke for a while about small things. Gardens, school, the changing seasons. I noticed Evelyn across the courtyard, sitting quietly, her husband beside her. Her eyes met mine, and for once, there was no defiance, no coldness, just humility. She stood slowly and approached. "My daughters stiffened beside me, may I?" she asked softly. I nodded. Evelyn looked at Sophie first. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I let my pain blind me. I hurt you and your mother in ways I can't undo." Sophie swallowed hard but managed a small, trembling nod. "Thank you for saying that." Then Evelyn turned to Lena. "You're stronger than I ever was at your age. Don't let people like me make you doubt that." Finally, she looked at me. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to hear the apology from my mouth, not just read it online. I'm ashamed of who I became." For a moment, the air was thick with silence. My hands trembled, my heart aching with years of memories. "I can't forget what you did," I said quietly. "But I can accept your apology. Not for you, but for us. Because I don't want my daughters growing up learning that forgiveness is weakness." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, then stepped back. "I don't expect anything more," she whispered. "Just thank you." When she walked away, Lena exhaled sharply, her voice cracking. I didn't think she'd ever actually say it. "Me neither," I said softly. But people surprise us sometimes. That night, driving home, the girls were quiet but peaceful. The kind of silence that feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years. At home, Sophie curled up on the couch beside me. "Mom," she said, "are we really okay now?" I brushed her hair back. "We're getting there, and that's enough." Over the next few weeks, life returned to its ordinary rhythm, but ordinary felt beautiful again. Mornings with the smell of coffee and pancakes. Evenings filled with laughter and quiet stories. The kind of peace that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. One afternoon, I found myself standing by the garden fence, trimming the flowers. Evelyn walked up the road, carrying a small basket of lemons from her tree. "I thought maybe you'd like some," she said awkwardly. I hesitated but smiled faintly. "Thank you. They look lovely." She placed the basket on the fence post. "They're a bit sour," she said with a weak laugh. "Sometimes sour things make the best recipes," I replied. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was civility, kindness, maybe even understanding. Later, I squeezed one of those lemons into a pitcher of water. The taste was sharp, refreshing, real. It reminded me of life itself, never purely sweet, never without bite. That evening I wrote again in my journal. Forgiveness isn't a door you open once. It's a path you keep walking, even when it hurts. I don't forgive Evelyn because she deserves it. I forgive because I refuse to let her mistakes define our peace. Weeks turned into months. Lena graduated high school with honors. Sophie got her art displayed in a small gallery downtown. We celebrated with pizza and homemade cake, and for the first time in a long while, the house echoed with unfiltered joy. Daniel stopped by that weekend to drop off a thank you note from the church. "Your story helped more people than you know," he said. "It made others look at their own bitterness differently." I smiled, touched. If our pain can help someone heal, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. Before he left, he said something that stayed with me. Sometimes peace doesn't come when the noise stops. It comes when you stop needing to be heard. That night, I sat outside under the stars, the garden blooming quietly around me. I thought about everything we'd survived. The betrayal, the lies, the humiliation, the long climb toward forgiveness. And I realized, peace wasn't something Evelyn could give or take away. It was something we built ourselves, one truthful day at a time. The girls were asleep, their doors slightly open. I peeked in before heading to bed. Sophie had paint stains on her hands, her sketchbook open beside her. Lena had fallen asleep with a book pressed against her chest. I whispered into the dark, "We made it." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, gentle, steady, calm. And for the first time in years, my heart felt quiet, not because everything was perfect, but because we had learned to live beyond the noise.